good percentage of the Congress is. But there seems to be in the Republican Party an attempt to diminish the existence of climate change or having any desire to want to talk about it. And I think that's because there is such a feeling expressed by the voters who turn out in a Republican primary that want to minimize any acknowledgement of climate change. And the reality is, what we ought to be open to is understanding the scientific measurements that are showing that things are changing on the earth and why they're changing. And then to understand what are the consequences, sea level rise being one of them, and how that is going to affect particularly an area like Florida, where ground zero is Miami Beach, and the evidence of the sea level rise is already very apparent there and in Fort Lauderdale, but it's going to affect eventually 3/4 of Florida's population, which is along the coast. And so we best try to reverse the effects of climate change. Well, what I wanted was to have a discussion from people who are involved in various aspects. So we had a fellow that was there involved with the fishing industry. We had someone who was directly involved in the tourism industry. We had someone that was more involved in looking at it from a business perspective, and get all of them to be the focal point of the witness testimonies, and then have a general discussion about it. So you heard them talking about what it's going to do to the tourism industry, which is a major industry in Florida. You saw them talk about what happened as a result of the Deepwater Horizon oil spill off of Louisiana, not even off of Florida. And yet the little oil that got onto Florida's beaches, that was broadcast around the world, and the tourists didn't come for one whole season because they thought all of our beaches were on the Gulf Coast were covered with oil. And so we wanted to talk about the effects on people's livelihood as fishermen, as well as hoteliers and dry cleaners and restaurants and all the ancillary businesses that are involved with that element. Well, the biggest driver is, of course, the scientific changes that are occurring in the planet and on the planet. And as a result of that, we best get ahead of the curve, because if the temperature continues to go up another 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit, which equates to approximately 2 degrees Celsius, it is considered by almost unanimously scientists that that's a point at which you cannot reverse it. Right. Even if you stopped putting the greenhouse gases high into the atmosphere that trap the heat. That, of course, would have devastating effects. The projections are that the waters around Florida over the next century could rise 1 to 4 feet. You do that, and a lot of our coastal areas are really flooded. So we're looking at this for not just the next generation of millennials, but for the generation of your children and grandchildren who are going to be severely impacted, and we would be negligent if we didn't act now. And yet we have a lot of people who deny that this is happening. When you see this planet from the window of a spacecraft, which I did 31 years ago, It is so beautiful, and yet it looks so fragile. As a matter of fact, it's amazing what you can see with the naked eye from that altitude orbiting the Earth. And then it's very sad what you can see how we're messing it up. There, 31 years ago, Madagascar had cut down almost all of its trees. And you could see no vegetation. When the rains came, the topsoil was washed off and into the rivers, and as a result, in the mouth of the rivers from that altitude, looking down, and Madagascar was about that big out the window of our spacecraft, you could see at the mouths of all the rivers, you could see all the silt into the bright blue waters of the Indian Ocean. It's important that you guys get involved and that you tell what in fact is happening. And then maybe that will ultimately create the political will to do something about it.